I invited my parents and siblings to a fancy Thanksgiving dinner. But that day, not a single one of them showed up. They abandoned me and ate somewhere else. I sat there, eating in tears and humiliation. Then my grandpa walked in and handed me an envelope. When I opened it, the truth left me completely stunned. There's a pain that festers when the people who are supposed to love you most see you only as an obligation. I carried that wound for 29 years, a silent ache that finally erupted one devastating Thanksgiving night when their betrayal opened the door to a truth I never saw coming. Hey everyone, Adam here. I'm 29, living in Omaha, Nebraska, a place most people think of as quiet, surrounded by cornfields. But for me, it was never home. Not really. I grew up in a foster family, and from the beginning, I was that puzzle piece that just didn't fit. I don't remember being adopted, it was just a cold fact thrown at me by my foster mom, Ellen, whenever she was mad. We saved you from a worthless life, she'd say, like I owed her the world. I was barely 3 months old when Robert and Ellen, my foster parents, brought me to their big, 2-story house with the perfect picket fence. They already had Eric, 2 years younger, and Hannah, 5 years younger than me. On paper, I was part of the family. In their hearts, I was just a ghost. It didn't take long to realize I was different. It wasn't just my dark hair and blue eyes that didn't match anyone else's, though that always made me wonder. It was how they treated me. At school, Ellen would introduce Eric and Hannah as my son and my daughter. When it came to me, this is Adam. Just Adam. Like the word son was too good for me. I remember one Christmas when I was about 7. Everyone was gathered for photos around the twinkling tree. I tried to join, and Hannah just pushed me away. You don't need to be here, she'd sneer, like I was some uninvited guest. Ellen just smiled, patted Hannah's head, and kept snapping pictures. I stood there, watching the lights, feeling like the whole world was celebrating, and I was stuck on the sidelines. I tried so hard to be seen, to be acknowledged. I aced school, brought home report cards and certificates that wallpapered the fridge. I helped Ellen with dishes, swept the yard, even learned to fold laundry exactly how she liked. All I got back were cold nods, or a curt, thank you. Once, I overheard them talking in the kitchen, thinking I was asleep. He does it because he knows he has to. We gave him a home. He owes us. Those words sliced through me. I wasn't their son. I was an obligation. But there was one person who made me feel like I truly existed, my Grandpa Henry. He lived on a small farm 2 hours from Omaha, where the cornfield stretched forever and the stars sparkled like diamonds. Every summer, I'd be sent there, and those were the only months I felt truly alive, truly loved. Grandpa never called me Adam in that dry, detached way. For him, I was kiddo, or my dear boy. He taught me to fix cars, the garage thick with the smell of motor oil. He showed me how to grow tomatoes. On quiet evenings, he'd strum folk tunes on his old guitar while I sang along, my voice terrible, but he never cared. Grandpa saw me. When I was 12, sitting with him on the porch swing, watching a fiery sunset, I blurted it out, Grandpa, why don't Mom and Dad love me? He stopped strumming, his hand resting on my shoulder. His eyes, etched with time's wrinkles, looked at me for a long, quiet moment. Adam, he said, his voice deep and warm, you're the best thing that family doesn't know how to cherish. Don't let your kindness depend on how they treat you. You're worth so much more than that. Those words burned into my mind, a small flame in my darkest days. Another time, he took me out to his field. As the sun set, he suddenly asked, do you ever think about your real mother? The question hit me like a shock. I hadn't really. Ellen always said she was irresponsible, not worth bothering with. But Grandpa's eyes were full of mystery, concern. I don't know, I stammered, I don't think she wanted me. He squeezed my hand. Never think that, Adam. There are stories you don't know yet. One day, it'll all make sense. Those vague words planted a seed of curiosity, a sense that my life held a secret bigger than I could imagine. But even the warmth of those summers couldn't erase the loneliness. Eric always saw me as a rival, not worth his attention, often calling me the stray when he thought no one heard. Hannah wasn't overtly cruel, but her eyes held a constant distance, like I was just a stranger. I told myself, work harder, study more, be perfect, and they'll see me differently. Deep down, I knew that hope was as fragile as a spiderweb. Every morning, I woke up in my small attic room, the only one without a big window. Eric and Hannah had spacious rooms, decorated with posters and toys. Mine had a single bed, an old desk, and a flickering lamp. I never complained, it just made Ellen frown. You should be grateful you have a place to sleep. But every time I walked downstairs, I felt like a guest in my own home. One memory still burns. When I was 14, they threw Hannah a birthday party. The living room was bursting with cake, balloons, laughter. I'd spent a week making her a leather bracelet, wrapped it carefully, and placed it on the gift table. Hannah opened it, glanced at it, and tossed it aside for more expensive gifts, an iPod, fancy shoes. Ellen didn't even notice. I stood in the corner, my heart aching. After the party, I found the bracelet in the trash, buried under crumpled paper. I picked it up, cleaned it, and tucked it away. That was the last time I tried giving them a gift. Another time, at 16, I tried to make Robert proud. He was a stern man, always busy with real estate. But I'd heard him brag about fixing their old truck. I snuck into the garage with Grandpa's tools. Eric's old bike sat there, flat tire, rusty. I spent hours oiling it, tightening bolts. When Robert came home, I excitedly pulled him to the garage. He just glanced at it and said, "Don't touch Eric's stuff. It's not yours." I froze. The blood drained from me. I wanted to explain, but the words were stuck. I went to my room, shut the door, and cried. Alone. My childhood was a strange mix, warm summers with Grandpa, cold winters in that grand, loveless house. I learned to hide my emotions, to smile even when my heart was breaking. I told myself I'd find where I belonged one day. I didn't know that journey would lead to a truth more painful than anything I'd ever known. At 18, college was my escape. A full scholarship to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, just an hour away, but it felt like a whole new world. The day I packed, Ellen stood at my door, arms crossed, her eyes as cold as ever. "Take care of yourself," she said, her voice flat, like I was a tenant. Robert just nodded, glued to his newspaper. I dragged my suitcase out, heart heavy, but a spark of hope flickered. Maybe leaving was the only way to find my place. University was a breath of fresh air. No one knew me as the adopted kid. I buried myself in finance, good with numbers, with analysis. Late nights, endless essays, presentations, all chances to prove my worth, not to them, but to myself. I worked part-time, saving every penny, determined not to ask them for anything. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. But that feeling of being adrift still clung to me. At night, lying in my dorm, I'd wonder if they ever thought of me, if they were proud. I wrote letters, sharing small victories. But all I got were brief emails from Ellen, "Good job, Adam. Keep it up." Nothing more. I saved them anyway, a small comfort. Every summer, I went straight back to Grandpa's farm. Those days were balm for my soul. He was older, his hair white, his back hunched, but his eyes still lit up for me. He taught me new songs, told stories, and sometimes, he'd repeat those haunting words, "One day, Adam, you'll know the truth." I'd ask what he meant, and he'd just smile, pat my shoulder, "Time will tell." I never pressed him, but those words, that mysterious seed, grew inside me. My final year, I graduated top of my class. On stage, accepting my diploma, I smiled, but inside, I felt hollow. I'd invited my foster parents, even called them directly. "We're very busy, Adam," Ellen said, her voice flat. "But congratulations." I scanned the audience. Other families were cheering, hugging. Only Grandpa was there, in an old, pressed suit, in the back row. When I stepped off stage, he hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he whispered. I smiled, but tears streamed down my face. It was the first time I'd truly cried in front of him. After graduation, I got a job offer in Omaha. I took it, not for them, but for Grandpa. The years after were about building a new me. I worked tirelessly, staying late, poring over reports. My colleagues called me Iron Adam because I never rested, never complained. They didn't know that every night, in my small apartment, I'd listen to Grandpa's folk songs, wondering if I was doing it right. As my career grew, I started sending my foster parents money every month. Not because they asked, but because I thought I owed them. But when I called, Ellen's voice was still distant. "Thank you, but you don't have to do that." Eric and Hannah, now adults, still leaned on them. Eric dropped out of college, Hannah obsessed with social media. I didn't resent them. I just hoped they'd see me as family one day. 6 years later, I was lead analyst. A huge milestone. Yet, the void in my heart remained. I longed for a family, a place where I truly belonged. Then, an idea hit me: Thanksgiving dinner. The perfect dinner. If I hosted it, invited everyone, maybe they'd finally see me as more than just the adopted kid. Maybe, this time, their eyes would be warm. I spent weeks preparing. An upscale restaurant, downtown Omaha, white silk, flickering candlelight. I reserved a table for 6, my foster parents, Eric, Hannah, Grandpa, and me. I handwrote invitations, pouring my heart into them. Dear Mom, I hope you'll share the joy of this holiday with me, I wrote to Ellen. Texts to Eric and Hannah, a call to Robert. I'll check my schedule, he said, flatly. I didn't let it discourage me. I pre-ordered everything, roast turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. A flame of hope burned bright. Maybe this time, I told myself, my heart trembling with fear. Thanksgiving Day. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my tie, smoothing my navy suit. Those deep blue eyes, my foster mother once said, didn't look like anyone else's. Today will be different, I whispered. Today, they'll see me. I arrived at 5 p.m. The setup was perfect, crisp tablecloth, 6 gleaming silver settings, flowers, soft candlelight. The manager smiled. Your family must be lively. Yeah, I hope so, I said, trying to hide the anxiety. 6 p.m. The appointed time. The restaurant filled with other families, laughter, chatter. I checked my phone. Nothing. They might be on their way, I reassured myself, but my heart hammered. I texted Hannah, are you here yet? No reply. I called Eric, it went to voicemail. Hey Eric, I'm here. Is everyone coming soon? I forced my voice to be calm. By 6:30, a burning sensation in my neck. The tables around me were full. A family next door laughed, an elderly couple held hands. I stared at my empty table, the 6 silent chairs mocking me. I called Ellen, my hands shaking. 5 rings. Adam, her voice cut like ice. Your father's not feeling well, and we've already eaten here. You'll manage, right? In the background, Hannah's laugh. Dishes clinking. Eric talking about a football game. They were home. Together. As if I didn't exist. Yeah, I'll manage, I choked out, someone squeezing my throat. I hung up. Stared at the flickering candles. Their light reflected off the wine glass, but didn't warm me. I felt like the whole world was laughing, celebrating, and I was left behind again, drowning in the loneliness I'd spent years escaping. I called the waitress. Small portion of turkey and mashed potatoes, I said. Just you tonight, she asked, her voice tinged with pity. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just me. The food arrived, the aroma of turkey making my stomach rumble, but every bite stuck in my throat. I looked at the empty chairs, imagining them laughing at home, eating the dishes I'd chosen, but without me. Tears welled up, but I bit my lip. No more crying. I was stronger. But I wasn't. I was just a 29-year-old man, alone in a fancy restaurant, clinging to a shattered dream. You okay? The waitress asked, her eyes full of sympathy. I nodded, but I wasn't. I'd never been okay. I reached for my phone, to call Grandpa, the one person who'd never abandoned me. But before I could dial, the restaurant door opened. A gust of cold autumn air, carrying the scent of fall. I looked up. My heart stopped. Grandpa walked in, his old wool coat, white hair glinting. He scanned the room, his eyes found mine, and that familiar smile spread across his face. Sorry I'm late, kiddo, he said, his voice warm, like summer. He sat across from me, his frail hands reaching for mine. Their warmth pulled me back from the abyss. Grandpa, I whispered, my voice breaking. I thought you weren't coming either. He shook his head. I'd never leave you alone, Adam. Never. He squeezed my hand, then his voice turned serious. Adam, he said, looking into my eyes, have you ever wondered why I've always loved you more than anyone else? The question hit me like a bolt of lightning. I stared, speechless. Time stopped. The candles flickered, but the world shrank to just us. This wasn't simple. It carried a secret. Why, Grandpa? I whispered. He took a deep breath. Adam, he began, his voice low, deliberate. There are things I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I waited for the right moment. Maybe that moment is now. He paused, looking out at the faint streetlights. You're not just my grandson. You're part of a story that both you and I have been caught up in. My heart pounded. I felt like I was standing before a locked door, and Grandpa held the key. What story, Grandpa? I asked, barely a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled an old, yellowed envelope from his coat and slid it across the table. Open it, Adam, he said. But first, promise me one thing, no matter how painful the truth is, you won't let it destroy who you are." My hands shook as I touched it. I felt its weight, not just paper, but years of unspoken questions. I looked at Grandpa, seeing both love and fear in his eyes. "Grandpa," I said, "I'm ready." He nodded slowly, his gaze piercing through me. The restaurant buzzed, but my world narrowed. I took a deep breath, opened the envelope. Inside, a faded photograph, a handwritten letter, and a business card. I picked up the photo. A young woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, my eyes. She was smiling, but with an indescribable sadness. "Who is this, Grandpa?" "Adam," he began, his voice heavy, "the woman in that photo is your biological mother." The blood in my veins stopped. My biological mother. Ellen only ever spoke of her with contempt. But this face, she looked fragile, like someone carrying a world of pain. "You need to know the truth," Grandpa continued. "But first, let me tell you the story from the beginning." He paused, looking out the window. "Over 30 years ago, I was a driver for a wealthy family in Denver. The kind of drama-filled family I used to tell you stories about. The woman in the photo, Clara, was the eldest daughter. Bright, beautiful, but her heart belonged to a man her family didn't approve of. I listened, falling into a story that felt both alien and intimately mine. Grandpa explained that Clara fell in love with a poor musician, David. Her family saw him as a gold digger. When Clara got pregnant, with me, her family disowned her, cut off all contact. David abandoned her too, when he realized there was no money. Clara was left homeless, alone, with a baby on the way. Clara came to me in her darkest days," Grandpa said, his eyes clouding. "She'd been kicked out, living in a tiny apartment, working part-time. I'd stopped by to check on her, and we grew close. She told me her dreams, about wanting a better life for her child, but she knew she couldn't do it then." He paused, his voice catching. "When you were born, Clara begged me for help. She said she needed time to rebuild her life, to become a mother worthy of you. She asked me to take you in." My chest felt heavy. I looked at the photo, trying to picture my mother in those lonely days. "So, what did you do?" I whispered. Grandpa lowered his head. "At the time, my son, your foster father, Robert, and Ellen had been married for years, no children. I convinced them to adopt you. I thought it was the best way to give you a home, a family. I was wrong." He paused, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't expect them to treat you the way they did. I thought they'd love you like their own. But every time I saw them push you away, it broke my heart." I looked back at the photo. Anger. Pity. Just emptiness. "What about my real mother?" I asked, my voice faltering. "Where did she go?" Grandpa picked up the business card. "Clara is a successful woman now," he said. "After leaving you, she left Denver, started over. College, career, now an entrepreneur in Seattle. She's been looking for you for over 10 years. Recently, she found me. She wants to meet you, Adam, but she's afraid of disrupting your life. She wants you to decide." I took the card. Clara Thornton, CEO, Thornton Enterprises. An address in Seattle, a phone number. I turned it over, holding a piece of myself. Then I opened the letter. The soft, slanting handwriting. "Dear Adam." My breath caught in my chest. I glanced at Grandpa, waiting. I took a deep breath and read. "I don't know if you'll ever want to hear from me, but I've never stopped thinking about you. I'm writing this hoping that one day you'll read it. I made the biggest mistake of my life leaving you. But please believe it wasn't because I didn't love you. You were my light. Disowned by my family, abandoned by the man I loved, I had nothing but my love for you. But I knew I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Henry, your grandfather, was the only one who didn't turn his back on me. He promised to take care of you, and I trusted him. I left not because I wanted to forget you, but because I wanted to become a mother you could be proud of. I went to college, worked day and night, and now I've built a stable life. Not a single day has passed without me thinking of you, wondering how you're living, if you're happy. I've been searching for you for over 10 years. But every time I think about meeting you, I'm afraid. Afraid you'll resent me. Afraid I'll disrupt your life. If you're reading this, I only ask for a chance to explain, to say the apology I've held in my heart for 29 years. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope one day you'll understand. I love you, Adam. I always have. Your mother, Clara Thornton." I folded the letter. Tears streamed down my cheeks. For Clara's pain. For the years I grew up cold and unloved. For finally finding a piece of myself, yet fearing it might break me. I looked at the photo, Clara's face, her blue eyes so much like mine. I tried to imagine her, a young woman alone, holding me for the last time before entrusting me to Grandpa. Grandpa, I choked, what do I do now? I placed the letter on the table, looking at him for an answer. Should I meet her, or try to forget this new, unsettling truth? Grandpa took my hand, trembling but warm. Adam, he said, I can't decide for you. This truth belongs to you. Only you know what your heart is telling you. Just remember one thing, no matter how difficult the path, you're never alone. I'll always be here. And Clara, she's waiting for you too. I looked into his eyes, seeing the love, the sincerity he'd given me all these years. He wasn't just my grandfather, he was the bridge. I took a deep breath. A decision solidified. I want to meet her, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I want to go to Seattle. I need to see what she's like now, to hear her story from her own lips. Grandpa smiled, a mix of pride and relief. Then do what feels right, kiddo. But before you go, is there anything else you want to do? Anything you need to settle before stepping into this new chapter? I thought for a moment. Then an idea sparked. I want to stop by my foster parents' house, I said, low but resolute. I want to tell them about this. Not to argue or blame, but to let them know I've found a part of myself. I want them to understand that I'm no longer the adopted kid they can ignore. Grandpa nodded, a glint of resolve in his eyes. All right, Adam. I'll go with you. Whatever happens, I'll be there. We left the restaurant, my mind reeling. The Omaha night was cold, but Grandpa's presence grounded me. We climbed into his old pickup, the familiar smell of motor oil. You sure about this, Adam? He asked. Facing them won't be easy. I'm sure, I replied, though fear still twisted inside me. We drove through Omaha's streets, past houses glowing with Thanksgiving lights. When we pulled up to their grand house, my heart hammered. Lights spilled from the living room, I heard Hannah's laughter, Eric's chatter. Still celebrating, as if my dinner had never happened. I knocked. Ellen opened the door, her eyes flickering with surprise, then settling into their usual coldness. Adam, she said, flatly. What brings you here so late? I need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated but opened the door wider. I stepped inside, Grandpa behind me. Robert was in his armchair. Eric and Hannah were eating pumpkin pie. They looked at me, but no one stood. What's this about, Adam? Robert asked, annoyed. I took a deep breath, Grandpa's hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I just learned the truth about my biological mother, I said, firm but emotional. She's alive, and I'm going to Seattle to meet her. I just wanted you to know, because I've called you family for 29 years. Silence. Hannah stopped chewing, her eyes uneasy. Eric smirked, ready with a snide remark, but Grandpa's stern look silenced him. Ellen crossed her arms, her gaze icy. Is that so? She sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You think finding your real mother will change anything? You're still just the adopted kid, Adam. Don't get any illusions. Her words cut like a knife. But this time, I didn't break. I'm not delusional, I replied, meeting her eyes. I just want to live true to myself. Thank you for giving me a home, but I don't need anyone in this room to validate me anymore. Robert started to speak, but Grandpa raised a hand. Enough, Robert, he thundered. You've had 29 years to treat this boy like a son, and you've failed. Now let him walk his own path. I turned, walked out, feeling a heavy burden lift. Grandpa followed. As we got back in the truck, he took my hand. You did good, kiddo, he said, his voice full of pride. Back at my apartment, I started preparing for Seattle. I held Clara's business card, typing her number into my phone. My finger hovered over, call. I wasn't ready to talk, not ready to hear the voice of the woman who birthed me. But I knew I needed to meet her, to look into her eyes, to understand why she left, and if her letter truly spoke her heart. Will you come with me? I asked Grandpa, who was on my sofa with his coffee. He smiled. If you want me to, I'll go. But this is your journey, Adam. I'm just along for the ride. I nodded, a new fire burning. I would go. I would face Clara. I would find my answers. 2 days later, Grandpa and I were on an early flight to Seattle. He gripped the armrest tightly. I'm not much for flying, he muttered, but his smile remained warm. I looked out at the clouds, wondering if Clara was thinking of me. I held her business card in my pocket. I pictured her as a strong CEO, but in my mind, she was still the fragile girl from the photo. At Seattle-Tacoma, my heart pounded. Seattle greeted us with a drizzle, gleaming skyscrapers, the smell of coffee. We checked into a small hotel. Grandpa called Clara. "Clara, it's me, Henry," he said, calm. "I'm in Seattle with Adam. He wants to meet you." He hung up, turned to me. "Clara will meet us at a coffee shop in Pike Place Market. She's emotional, Adam, but she's also scared, just like you." That afternoon, we walked into a cozy coffee shop in Pike Place Market. The aroma of roasted coffee, the salty scent of Elliott Bay. Rustic brick, small wooden tables, soft lamps. I chose a window seat, watching the busy street. Grandpa sat across, quietly observing. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted, my hands twisting. "I don't know what to say. What if she's not what I expect?" Grandpa placed his hand over mine. "Just be yourself, Adam. That's all Clara wants." I nodded, heart still pounding. I kept glancing at the door. At exactly 3 p.m., it opened. A woman stepped in, navy coat, blonde hair neatly tied back. Glasses, but those deep blue eyes, identical to mine. She scanned the room, her gaze met mine, and she froze. Her hand trembled as she walked toward us. I stood, my legs unsteady. Grandpa stood too, offering a gentle smile. "Clara," he said. Warmly, "This is Adam." Clara looked at me, her eyes dropping to the small teardrop birthmark on my hand. A trembling smile spread across her lips. "Adam," she whispered, her voice breaking. You look more like me than I imagined." I stood there, speechless. No floods of tears, no explosive words, just an awkward mix of emotions. We were both afraid to shatter the moment. Clara stepped forward, pulled me into a hug. Not a tight embrace, but a trembling one, like she was holding something fragile. I felt her warmth, her perfume, a strange sensation, like I'd found a missing part of myself. She whispered, her voice choked, "Can you forgive me for letting you grow up so alone?" I didn't answer immediately. I hugged her back, time standing still. I thought of Omaha, the lonely nights, the years of feeling pushed aside. I wanted to forgive her, but the words stuck. Not because I didn't want to forgive Clara, my mother, but because I hadn't yet learned to forgive myself for letting that pain define me for so long. I let go, looked into her blue eyes, so like mine, and whispered, "I'm here now, Mom." It was all I could manage. Clara smiled, trembling but hopeful. We sat down, Grandpa a silent guardian. The coffee shop buzzed, but my world was only her. "How did you grow up?" Clara asked, soft but eager. "I want to know everything. If you're ready to share." I looked down at my coffee cup, steam rising. Where to begin? How could I sum up 29 years of pain, loneliness, but also the warmth with Grandpa? I told her about Omaha, the grand but cold house, how I tried to be perfect, always treated as an obligation. I spoke of summers at Grandpa's farm. But I didn't mention the nights I cried alone, or the bracelet in the trash. Those scars were still too deep. Clara listened, gripping her coffee cup. When I mentioned Grandpa, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Henry," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Grandpa just nodded, giving us space. After the coffee shop, Clara invited us to her penthouse in downtown Seattle. A modern building, huge glass windows overlooking Puget Sound. Elegant interior, oak floors, abstract paintings. I couldn't help but compare it to my cramped attic room in Omaha. Clara poured tea. "Adam," she began cautiously, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I want a chance to make things right. If you want, you can come live here, in Seattle. I can arrange a good position for you at Thornton Enterprises, or anything you want. I just want you to know you always have a place here with me." Her offer stunned me. Part of me yearned to accept a new life, a real family, a place where I wouldn't have to prove my worth. But another part hesitated. I'd spent my whole life standing alone. Accepting her help felt like giving up something, maybe my pride, or fearing another abandonment. I looked at Grandpa. He gave a gentle smile, as if he understood the storm in me. "What do you think, Adam?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Mom," I said, looking at Clara. "But I don't want to start with the position you set up. If I work at Thornton Enterprises, I want to start from the bottom, like anyone else. I want to rise on my own. Not because I'm your son, but because I deserve it." Clara's eyes sparkled with surprise and pride. "You're more like me than I thought," she said, smiling. "I respect your decision. But whatever you choose, I'll always be here." I nodded. A weight lifted. I was choosing how to define myself. And for the first time, I felt I had that right. A few days later, Clara and I convinced Grandpa to move to Seattle. "I'm getting old, Adam," he teased, his eyes bright. "But if you and Clara want a grumpy old man hanging around, I won't object." Clara laughed, a hearty laugh I'd never heard from her before. "Henry, there's always room for you," she said, "and a small garden on the balcony would suit you perfectly." I smiled, picturing him tending tomatoes in a penthouse. He was the bridge. I decided to stay with them for a while, to be close, to learn about my mother. I applied to Thornton Enterprises, got an entry-level financial analyst position. My resume stood out. On my first day, standing before that gleaming building, I felt like a schoolboy. But this time, I wasn't afraid of rejection. I had Clara, Grandpa, and most importantly, myself. The weeks in Seattle were both unfamiliar and miraculous. Clara and I started small, dinners, conversations about our lives, music, dreams. She told me about college, how she pushed herself to succeed so she could find me. I shared stories of summers with Grandpa. Grandpa adapted quickly. One evening, on the balcony, he played a folk tune, and Clara unexpectedly joined in. Her voice soft, full of emotion. I watched them, feeling my heart slowly fill, piece by piece. But healing wasn't easy. Some nights, I still thought of my foster family. Ellen's coldness, Eric's smirks, Hannah's indifference. I wondered if they regretted it. But then I realized I no longer needed their answers. I'd found where I belonged, not in a house, but in the hearts of Clara and Grandpa, and within myself. Seattle became a part of me. Every morning in my rented apartment, I'd wake to the waves of Puget Sound, the scent of coffee. I was no longer the boy in the Omaha attic, desperately trying to please. I was Adam, 29, building my life, with Clara and Grandpa beside me. But the past lingered. One evening, after a long report, I sat at my dining table and wrote a letter to my foster family. Not to blame, but to close that painful chapter. I wanted them to know I'd found happiness, that I was no longer the abandoned child they were used to. "Dear Mom, Dad, Eric, and Hannah, I hope you're all doing well. I found my biological mother, and I'm now living in Seattle, starting a new life. I'm not writing to blame or resent. I just want to thank you for the years you gave me a roof over my head, even if it never truly felt like home. I've learned that family isn't just the people you live with. It's the ones who choose to love and cherish you. I found that here with my mother and Grandpa. I don't expect you to change or feel regret. I only hope you live well, as I'm trying to do. Wishing you all the best, Adam." I folded the letter, mailed it next morning. As it left my hands, a weight lifted. I didn't need them to respond or apologize. That letter was my goodbye to the past. 4 months later, a text from Hannah. Unexpectedly. I was at lunch with a colleague. "Adam, Mom, and Dad are struggling. Eric blew all their savings on gambling. Can you help?" I stared at the text. A cold gust from Omaha. Eric, reckless as ever. Hannah, with her designer bags. But this time, I felt no obligation. I'd sent them money for years, only to get coldness. Now I had a new life, a new family. I wouldn't be pulled back into that darkness. I showed the text to Grandpa. He read it, shook his head, his eyes stern. "Adam," he said, low but firm, "you've done more than enough. They had their chance. Don't let them drag you back. You deserve your own life." I nodded, certain. A few weeks later, Grandpa told me he'd called Robert. He made it clear I was no longer responsible. "I told them they have to face the consequences of what they've sown," he said, his eyes glinting. "They can't use you anymore." I didn't ask for details. I knew Grandpa had done what was necessary. My foster family, with their extravagant lifestyle and Eric and Hannah's irresponsibility, was facing financial ruin. But this time, I felt no guilt. I'd given them enough. It was time to focus on my own life. That fall, I hosted a small party at Clara's penthouse for my 30th birthday. Unlike that lonely Thanksgiving, this table was filled with laughter and warmth. Clara arranged a pumpkin pie, my favorite. Grandpa strummed his old guitar, his eyes sparkling with joy. Colleagues from Thornton Enterprises joined us, friends who valued me for me, not because I was Clara's son. I stood in the room, watching them all, my heart swelling. Clara approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Happy birthday, son," she said softly. For the first time, son from a mother didn't bring pain. I hugged her. Thank you, Mom, for finding me, I whispered. As the party ended, I stood on the balcony with Grandpa, looking out at Seattle's twinkling lights. How do you feel, kiddo? He asked. Free, I replied, my voice steady. For the first time in my life, I know where I belong. Looking back, life isn't about seeking validation from others, but finding value in yourself. I once thought my foster family would give me a home, that if I tried hard enough, they'd love me. I was wrong. Love can't be forced. Family isn't just who you live with, it's who chooses to stand by you. If I could give advice to anyone feeling lost, I'd say, don't be afraid to face your past, no matter how painful. The truth may hurt, but it can also set you free. Trust in your own worth. Seek out those who value you for who you are. And most importantly, forgive, not just others, but yourself for being strong enough to weather the storms. My life is still unfolding. Maybe I'll become a leader like Clara, or chase new dreams. Maybe one day I'll fully forgive Clara, my foster family, and the lonely years. But for now, I know I'm no longer the abandoned child. I'm Adam, and I found myself. This isn't just for the rejected, but for anyone searching for meaning. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. You don't need to hold on to pain forever. Let go, move forward, and believe you're worthy of a place to call home.